Hello and welcome to today's content of Garvall since he has been announced, and I'll talk more specifically about him as a unit in general, but mostly for the PvP aspects and important abilities that he has. Due to not all the information on Garvall on the War of Divisions calc website being finished on the unit builder, I'll be using builds and such for him on the Japanese side so you can get a good grasp of example builds that will be shown. Without further ado, let's get started. So for Garvall, kind of like El Sorel, he starts with a brand new main job, which is going to be the Energist, which looks like the hand manipulating thing. Ironically, it doesn't actually have strike type damage or it does anything with fists. It does have Chi though, kind of like I guess you could think of like a monk. But anyways, going on to the abilities. So first off, he has the introduction of Chi Shot, where it's a missile magic attack type damage. And as you can see, it's going to be 4 range. It doesn't do a lot of damage, however, it does have the special typing of missile and magic. The Chi barrier, which is going to be like the standard for like staff mages, is going to reduce physical damage taken for up to 50% 3 times in a row. There's going to be a very strong attack, which is Twin Chi Rupture, which is going to do 245%. At short range, however, it does hit hard and it's AoE. Detonation Blast, which I would argue is one of the most important abilities that Garvall can have, is not only that it's a 100% hit, 165% damage modifier is pretty high considering Garvall's offensive stats, and looking at the range, it is not only 4 tiles out and it's AoE, but also has decent range and AoE height. Lastly, like the takeaway is going to be his Concentrated Chi Lancer, which is his limit break. This is going to be very like strong and key to his point as a unit because it decreases it debuffs your spirit first by 30 at max level for 3 turns, and it increases the spirit penetration on the skill by 50% for that attack. You have to keep this in mind. It is not a cast or like spirit penetration for like more than 1 turn. It is for this attack only. This is like rebel intent for Sakura. Most importantly though, it will be used for the spirit debuff, which is going to be very effective in helping Garvall one-shot units, basically, or deal significant damage. So for the sub-job takeaways, the Energist main job is only going to have the Chi Shot Flurry that's relevant, which it helps chain with Missile and Dark, but it's not going to be too useful in terms of like utility and usefulness compared to Red Mage and the Kododama sub-jobs. Moving on to the Kododama sub-job, however, not only does Garvall have access to nimble movement, which is kind of like wing staff, or it does increase his mobility, which is very nice to have. It has Earth Rendering Pain and Spirit Breaking Pain, which are also like pretty good high hitting, no cast abilities. The Spirit Breaking Pain also has a stun if you want to go for that type of cheese. Most importantly though, for the Kododama, outside of nimble movement, is going to be like a Heart Like Needles, which increases the spirit penetration for Garvall. The thing is that people do not understand is that while his LB does have the 50% spirit penetration, it is only for that attack. It's not going to be like a buff for him the entire turn. It's only for that attack. So if he actually wanted spirit penetration like from a buff or like from a source, since he doesn't have a passives, he would have to run a Kododama. Outside of that, Red Mage sub, he does have Cura, Asuna, and Jamming Thrust. He does use Cura in auto, it does happen. He does not prioritize it, however, but if he has a free turn, he will use that ability. Asuna is there good for if you have someone that's under status ailment, but most importantly will be Jammer Thrust, which is going to be high damage and high range. The reason why Jammer Thrust is most important here for Red Mage sub job is that it's going to be a single target attack. Most, if not all, of Garvall's hard hitting attacks are going to be AoE. Same thing with Kododama is gonna be like Red Mage, where those Earth Rendering Pain or Spirit Breaking Pain or Jammer Thrust are all gonna be his primary single target high damage abilities. So getting onto the resistances and passives for Garvall. As we can see here, he is weak to Strike, Magic, and Light Element by 10%. Because he is Dark Element, obviously Light is gonna have the advantage. He has a 5% base chance for, not chance, but 5% base slash resist, and then 10% to Missile and Pierce. Basically, all I can say for this is that none of his resistances are crazy good, but none of them are like crazy bad in what he can do. I will say though, it is a bit concerning for the Magic and Light, and I'll explain later why, but for now, his overall resistances are okay, and because he does have access to the physical damage barrier on his main job, he does not have to worry too much about his physical, taking too much physical damage. So from here, her resistances to the statuses, he has very relevant / good resistances in my opinion, because he is 50% resistant to stop, so he never, not never, but he doesn't have to really use a ribbon to ever stop, to prevent himself from getting stopped. The charm is nice in mostly class match or like super big cheesers with like Ziza or other Steelheart users. And the 10% for the disable is very nice. It's not 25% unfortunately, however 10% is still favorable in that it helps him not get disabled as much. For his master ability, he's going to have the same thing as all mono elements do. For his dark element, he's going to get the 10% HP, the 15 dark attack, and for himself, he gets the magic plus 20%, so he's going to get a lot more damage. As you can see here, he has the move 3, jump 1. He does not have any passives to increase that mobility. He does, however, if he goes the Kododama sub-job, does have the nimble movement if he wants to get in quickly. So for his passives, I'll have to say the number one I would recommend or think about would be Hyper Vitality. So Hyper Vitality increases the agility by 30% and the magic and dex by 60% for 5 turns. This increases Garvall's usefulness in the first 5 turns by a crazy amount of boost. 60% magic, 60% dex, it means there will be a lot of damage included in his abilities. Dex not as good as the raw magic stat, however it is relevant in his skills being used, so it's still there to help. So you could think of you're getting 60% magic and then you get a little bit more because of the dex. The agility also is very good because it makes him very fast. Basically Hyper Vitality is going to be very, very strong in almost all circumstances. The only problem is after 5 turns, he loses all those benefits, and it'll feel like he's not even using one passive. However, 5 turns, you could assume it's a lot. You can also assume it's not a lot, but it is something to consider when you do use that passive. Outside of that, he always has room for other passives, such as the Magic Up and the Chi Flow expansion. They both have the 10%, not 10%, sorry, 30% magic increase stat, which is very nice to have. There's the Mage's Protection for the magic resistance, because as I said before, he starts with -10 magic resist. And then there's Light's Spirit's Blessing, which is going to be spirit and light resistance if he wanted to go that route as well. Just saying, he doesn't necessarily need Hyper Vitality to deal damage. However, the benefits from it is very large and marginal for how much he gets out of it. For the Niche and Flex, he does not get as much AP as other mages, traditional mages. He gets the same AP as kind of like Kilfi, which is about it hovers between 40 to 60% of his max AP. So it's not that he really needs initial AP up, but it is there if you want to use it. But I would not really recommend it in my opinion. Even though he is very AP cost heavy, I still would not recommend it. For his reaction abilities, this is where it gets very interesting. So he gets the introduction to all the red mages get magic reflex, and he has as well. But for him, the Energist gets the hyper reactivity, which is basically magic reflex but for physical damage only. As you can see here, he has 15% chance to proc it for a reflex for physical damage only. For the Steel Ephemeral form, which is going to be from the Kododama subjob, it's going to be like the taking less damage from all damage sources in general. It's going to be very useful. Regardless, magic reflex and the hyper reactivity are also going to be very relevant. They can make or break a match if it's very close, but in the overall, they're going to be less. It's going to not activate as much compared to the other passives. Like hyper reactivity is going to be 15% at max, while magic reflex and the steeled form has 20% at max. So it depends on how you want to go about it, but those are definitely relevant in fights if they do proc. And we get to the rating of Garvall out of 10. So to get started, for his pre-EX, his preliminary spot, I will give him a 10 out of 10. The reason why for this is that he's able to deal 2 types of damage typings, magic, which is very relevant and very common, but also missile that deals magic damage. It's not that he's gonna one-shot people with his missile magic damage, even though it's possible he can if they're really weak against it. But it gives him that option so he's not locked to only magic. He also has a spirit spirit penetration buff on his sub-job as well as his LB with the debuff. It's gonna be very important on fighting basically against like Rain, Agrius, other people that stack the Spirit, but those are gonna be very relevant. So he's gonna have like, it's gonna be hard to mitigate against Garvall with only Spirit. His Detonation Blast is highly effective against evasion teams, and because it's also AoE, he can take out multiple evasion units instantly with it. He starts with a base 6 defense and 2 Spirit, while being able to choose between both physical or magic reflection reactions, or all damage mitigation. So he has very good damage mitigation reactions if they do proc. So it's very nice to have. His 6 base defense is not bad. He can't really boost it. However, 6 base is still relevant because you can stack it up with like Platinum Robe or stuff like that, or like the Elf Cloak. 2 Spirit is definitely not a lot. It's not going to really help him too much, but if he does use the Spirit passive he has, it can change that to be very useful if you went that build. So his Red Mage job, the flexibility allows up, he can do possible side healing, and the Jammer Thrust is going to be important. The reason why I say Jammer Thrust is important is that it's not only AP cheap, it's one of the longest range skills he can have, as well as it has very, very good damage. So that's going to be very relevant there for his flexibility. The Kodadama subjob also has good things like nimble movement and spirit penetration buff, but Red Mage also has the healing, so it's like, it depends which route you want to go about it. As I said in the previous slide, Hyper Vitality passive is extremely strong if you utilize it correctly. Unfortunately, since I do not have a Japanese account and I do not have Garvall, I can't test right now if Hyper Vitality resets in Guild War. But from a friend I have that plays the Japanese server, he says he assumes it does, but until I get actual proof, I don't really want to comment on it. So I'll just say that if the passive does reset, it's very strong. If it does not reset, then Garvall's round 2 in Guild Wars are going to be very, very weak. Either way, round 1 is always going to be very strong, and on shorter maps, it's going to be very strong. There's not much negatives to it other than that it runs out in 5 turns, but it's an extremely good passive because you get 30% agility and 60% magic and 60% dex. It's just a very good passive to utilize for Garvall. Also, his master ability, Mono Dark Team passive, is going to be very strong with the right units. You can get super high firepower because we already have Dwayne for it. We have Garvall, and in the future, even though I didn't mention it in the 10 out of 10, there's going to be Black Rose Helena that he can also benefit with and give her as well. So there's going to be a lot of synergy going for him that we can see already in the future. So, for his post-EX, before his own EX, however, I gave him a 9.5 out of 10. There's a reason why I reduced 0.5 out of him, and I'll explain it while I'm talking about it. So, first off, he is weak to light units and magic attack types, so he has to be wary of magic casters. And this means that he's not forced into a smart robe. However, he has to be wary of fighting other mages without a smart robe because he has nothing except for unless you go to passives like the spirit passive or the magic resistance passive, he has to rely on his reaction ability outside of that. And since he is weak to magic teams innately without any mitigation, that means Garvall can be one-shot by Yuna and Sakura's without the proper mitigation. As I said, he can stack up the light resistance and magic if he wanted, but without it, he can get one-shot by those units. He's reliant on his physical barrier to stay alive from physical damage, and what I mean by that is kind of like, he's not a Kilfi where Kilfi has a defense passive that can allow her to tank physical damage even longer. Garvall does not have that. He is reliant on his physical barrier to survive physical hits. So it's something to consider. If you have a barrier breaker against him, it'll be very effective. Other than that, him having the physical barrier is just very good in general. If you can break it and force him into a bad spot to kill him, that's good. As I said earlier, he has, without any equipment or vision cards or like TMRs, Garvall does not have any magic attack type penetration, nor does he have Dark Imperil. He would need Dwayne or Black Rose Helena for the Dark Imperil, and the no magic attack type penetration, he will have to use Soul of Thasma or his TMR, which I will be talking about very soon. Hyper Vitality, as I said, is a very, very big boost for 5 turns. However, if he's fighting in long, very large maps, or he's fighting against turtle teams, he can get rid of that 5-turn Hyper Vitality passive, and it will make him significantly weaker. Like I said before, since those benefits disappear after 5 turns, He basically has one slot of passive that is missing completely. He has very high damaging abilities, however they do cost a lot of AP. He starts roughly around like 40 to 60% of his start total AP, and it's something to consider that if he does not buff up or uses his TP abilities, he will quickly run out of AP after like 2 or 3 attacks at most. And outside of Hyper Vitality and Detonation Blast, even though weirdly Detonation Blast has a lot of usages and you shouldn't run out of Hyper Vitality very quickly, Garvall actually has very low accuracy due to his low dex and luck, so it's something to consider. If the opponent doesn't have Detonation Blast or wasted all of it, evasion teams can dodge him basically, but it's not going to be realistic in my opinion. Maybe like no, just never mind. It's not going to be realistic, but it is something to consider if it happens. And the reason why he's still 9.5 out of 10, even after EX without his own EX, is that he can still rival other top EX magic casters in damage. Like his raw damage stat output is just high enough that he's going to be relevant for a long time. Lastly, I talk about his TMR and the chase rating for it. I'll give him 9 out of 10, even maybe 9.5 out of 10, but I'll explain why I did not give it a higher rating. So his TMR is going to be a Peacetime Brooch. It's an accessory for 303 HP, which is good. 8 defense is pretty good, especially since he has a base 6. I mean, you could put on someone else as well. The crit rate 8, crit rate gets into very like muddy waters. I don't want to talk too much about it, but the most important part is going to be the active, which is Fury Surge. So not only does it increase your magic by 40% for 3 turns, it also increases your magic resistance penetration by 50% for 3 turns. And here is why I give it a 9 out of 10. 50% magic resistance penetration is huge. It will do like it literally penetrates a huge amount if they stack the magic resistance. However, the usages for this is going to be heavily based in PvP mostly, 1. And 2, even if you used it in PvE, unless it's like tower with like super like cheese and you're trying to brute force something, it's not going to be as effective as using a more efficient route, such as just targeting the weakness instead of trying to create a weakness. And lastly, the third reason I give it a 9 out of 10 instead of higher is that if the unit does not have magic resistance, the 50% magic resistance penetration is not going to do much. So if they have a lot of spirit or AoE or single target resistance, the magic attack resistance does not actually do too much for him. But it is relevant. That's why I'm saying, as much as it's a good thing, it's not going to be as like top tier, such as like Ziza Bells, stuff like that. So yeah, that's why I rate him overall. I think Garvall is an extremely good unit, but he does have his slight downfalls that you have to consider if you're going to be fighting with him or as him. And speaking of which, of fighting as or against Garvall, here is the slide. So fighting as Garvall, he's going to be one of the hardest hitting magical dark element DPSs out there, as well as magic. So he's going to be able to rival similar raw damage output such as like Ruin Storms, but in terms of magic, not physical. With a dark, his mono dark team master ability, you could pair him with other dark units in general to like boost them up, such as even Dwayne. You could stack up both of their master abilities and stack that up. It's going to be very useful to have. It's not going to make or break a team, but it's very useful for sure. Since Garvall has medium to long range abilities, if he had Jammer Thrust and or Nimble Movement, it helps him reach that longer range status instead of just being at medium to longer range. Since most of his hard hitting abilities is going to be from like shorter, like medium range, which is going to be like 3 or 4 tiles away, instead of using like Detonation Blast on like a tank or Jammer Thrust from very far away, he will need to close in a little bit or have room in front of him, so it's something to consider. Garvall's Detonation Blast can easily one-hit KO, if not all evasion units. Some can survive maybe, if like maybe Halloween Leela if she has, I don't know, magic resistance I guess, but other than that, Detonation Blast is going to be very highly effective against evasion units. And since these 100% abilities and more high air accuracy like units are going to be coming out for a little bit, such as like even Yuna coming out. Elsero has her accuracy passive. Garvall himself has the Detonation Blast. Aurun comes out with more. Evasion's going to start dwindling down a little bit once they come out. But until then, Detonation Blast is definitely going to take out evasion teams very quickly and easily. As I said in the previous slides, Garvall's Hyper Vitality is going to be one of the strongest passives to utilize. Make sure you avoid turtling or start staying far back, or if it's a very large map, make sure that Garvall can get to the other side of the enemies and attack them before it runs out. So if you're gonna fight against Garvall, Garvall is going to be very weak to strike and magic type attacks without proper mitigation, so if you bring those damage types, he has to respect it, because as much as he deals damage, he also takes a lot of those types of damage. Light units can deal very good, if not lethal damage against Garvall, mostly light damage that is going to be magic. I say this because if he has his physical barrier on, there's not many that can actually break his barrier in one go. It would have to be either Ramza's triple blow or Elsorel's the drain, her triple 3-hit. Other than that, all the other light element physical hitters are going to have a hard time breaking his barrier, and he'll be able to take them out before they can deal enough damage to him. However, that's why I said magic. So like stuff like Holy or like Sakura's Rebel Intention, stuff like that will do high damage to Garvall, maybe even 1-hit KO him if he's not mitigating against it properly. So bring those units if you want to take care of him. As I said, like with the light units, be wary of bringing physical damage against Garvall without a barrier break or a multi-hit ability, because his physical barrier is going to be very highly effective. It's kind of like Agris with Saintly Wall. Having that barrier there and not being able to break it fast enough will allow Garvall to kind of like have the upper hand, basically. And Garvall has a flexibility to magic and small magic missile type damage types, so be wary of building only magic resistance. If you have very high magic resistance and he does not have magic penetration, but you have bad or negative missile resistance, he can still use his chi shots and deal high damage with those. You can waste Garvall's hyper vitality passive by staying back and turtling with buffs to make him much weaker, because if his hyper vitality runs out, he loses a huge part of stats, and if you're able to like run him out with that before he can get to you, you're gonna have a very much better time fighting against him, because he will not be able to like kill you very fast. Detonation Blast, as I said earlier, easily takes out evasion units, so try your best not to run evasion units into Garvall. He will take them out very easily unless it's like a hard counter to him. Garvall focuses mostly on AoE high damaging abilities, but if he does like go for Jammer Thrust or like the Spirit Breaking Pain from the Kododama subjobs or the Red Mage subjobs, he can deal a lot of single target high damage as well. It's something to consider. Most of his signature abilities are going to be AoE and short, medium to short range, but he does have access to longer range single target abilities as well. He's going to be susceptible to like important statuses such as like Confusion, Silence, and Disable, despite Disable being like 10%. Silence, I do not know actually if it affects his, sorry about that, if it affects the Energist abilities. I do know for regular magic such as like Kododama on certain abilities as well as Red Mage, it can affect it, but we'll have to see if Silence also affects his main job abilities as well. So with that, we move on to if you're fighting as Garvall and what units to consider or bring. All Ruinstern, Kane, Dwayne, Whisper, Venera, they're all not only dark units, but they can all benefit off the master ability. Ruinstern will definitely like up the DPS in your team, same with Kane. Dwayne and Whisper are going to be very good tanks for Garvall if you want Garvall to stay a little bit back or just use most of his long range abilities. Those two will be a very good frontline for him. Venera is there, Venera can be evasion. She still is relevant in my opinion for damage with Armor Cleaver, but if she's going evasion, but you can make her a little bit more tankier with like using the dark mono team master abilities, she can gain benefits from that. I specifically put Ildria here instead of Halloween Leela here because Ildria does have her LB, the CT manipulation, to help speed up Garvall if he does need a turn. It's not haste or quicken. As I said earlier, haste and quicken is going to be a double-edged sword with Garvall if you use hyper vitality. Same with Ildria's LB, but I put her there mostly also because she has the utility to give magic resist buffs from her Spellblade to Garvall if you opted in for that. So if you want to fight against Garvall, here's what I kind of thought up. First off, it's going to be Agrius, because Garvall's most of his hard-hitting abilities are going to be AoE, but they're going to be medium to shorter range. He's going to be forced into single target damage against Agrius, what she can mitigate against if it's longer range, so like Jammer Thrust or the Spirit Breaking Pain or Earth Breaking Pain, Earth Rendering something. But Agris can take those damages pretty well, and she can deal a lot of statuses onto Garvall. Garvall's gonna have to basically watch out for Agris in certain ways. Agris also has the magic resistance as well, so it's something to consider when you're fighting against her. Winter Venera. She not only has high magic resistance, and she could build very high spirit and magic resistance as a combo if she wanted to because of her kit. She's also strike type damage, so she can easily take out Garvall if Garvall cannot kill her fast enough. Halloween Leela, she has access to not only her LB if Garvall was buffed up, but she also has the Holy because she's a math girl basically. It can deal very high damage, especially with Typhoon adding in the magic attack resistance penetration. If Garvall stacked the magic attack penetration, Leela can still do a good amount of damage to him. Sakura as well. Rebel Intention or her Eternal Pain, her LB, will definitely do insane damage to Garvall. Garvall has to watch out for Sakura, and like in the future also, like a month later, is gonna be Yuna. If he does not have proper mitigation against them, he can get taken out very quickly. I put the two sniper girls here, Winter Victor and Niv Lu, specifically because they have barrier breaking abilities. They're not gonna necessarily one-shot Garvall, and I'll say it right now, I don't believe he can ever get one-shot by these two. But them breaking his barrier allows him to be significantly vulnerable to physical damage after that. So it's something to consider when you're trying to fight against Garvall and what units you want to bring. Oh, and I almost forgot to mention, but I will put two kind of example sample builds for Garvall if you just want to see like what types you can like kind of like build on him, and they'll be in the description box below. And we arrived to the end of the video. As always, if you liked my unit analysis video on Garvall, please like or subscribe. Thanks for watching if you got to the end, and until the next video, peace out.